Okay.
5, 4, 3. All right, and we're back. Welcome to another episode of the show, the horror podcast. Here we are, um, bringing another selected and hopefully what you will feel is a quality horror feature to your attention. I've got my guest here today. He's an old friend of mine. We go back about 15 years. This is Ryan Daly, everybody. So, welcome to
Hey,
the show, Ryan. First time
thank you.
guest on the show.
Yep, thank you. Thank you. This is fun. I was looking forward to this.
Yeah, for the 5 people that are going to watch this, let's be clear. You're not exactly a huge fan of horror, but
Mm-mm.
we had talked a little about the Universal classics, and I didn't want to touch that because I think we'd done two already.
Yeah.
We had done two already. I didn't want to go back into the old, just
Mm-hmm.
beating a dead horse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
However, you and I, over many nights at the bar, have sat down and discussed movies, and so sci-fi horror has come into it.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, you had an idea for a movie that we talk about a lot that always pops up. But what I wanted to do was to have you have a screening for a movie that I knew you hadn't seen, but I
Yeah.
felt was a really good movie.
Mhm.
For real fans of horror, it's not necessarily about gore. A good horror
No.
movie can be gory, but it's not a prerequisite.
Mm-hmm.
Solid performance, good writing, maybe good special effects or something like that.
Yeah.
But what I was thinking of when I was saying that, based on what I was talking about 2 weeks ago, came from the 90s. And in the 90s, I was talking in another episode about how that had been a great time for well written, well performed, independent films that weren't big budgets. They
Mm-hmm.
weren't special effect or CGI heavy features. 2 weeks ago, we got into that with another guest when I had Bill Bengal on the show, and we talked about the Blair Witch Project, which was
Yeah.
from 1999. We talked about other features that came along at that time. We talked about the features of Spike Jones that came along at the time. We talked about train spotting. We
Mm-hmm.
talked about coming into contact for the first time with Kevin Smith, who basically made a film inside a convenience store with clerks. We talked about uh, Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. And so there are lots of these movies that happened in the 90s that were just sort of casting off that big budget, CGI
Yeah.
kind of, special effects kind of thing. And this was a movie that I felt, qualified. Coming back to 1999 again, was Ravenous.
Mm.
Ravenous is a movie that I saw in the theater in 1999, not really having too much of an idea what it was about, but when I walked out of the theater, I just, you can tell when you've seen a good quality horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the movie that I wanted to show you. We sat down for a screening 3 or 4 days ago, and so now here you are.
Yeah. And yeah, well, first off, I'm not totally against horror, obviously. I'm just very picky about it. Like I like the thriller, more suspenseful stuff. Like my favorite horror movie of all time is Psycho. All right, because it's a thriller. It totally goes one way and then it totally goes another way you're not expecting.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, you've got someone who you think is running away from a robbery
yeah,
of sorts. It sort of looks like a crime drama,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then it just sort of veers off into
Yeah,
something else completely that there's no real
yeah,
warning
yeah,
or.
yeah. And that's kind of what I liked about Ravenous was that it's more for me it fits more of the thriller category. I think it's thrilling and it's suspenseful. Um, and for a movie about cannibals, it's not really super gory. You know,
No,
it's
no.
not super gory. And I think I mentioned this to you. I can see how it might, I don't know if it was, but I could see how it might have been marketed to the people who like super gore, like a movie like Saw or Hostel or something like that. And then they would have come away disappointed because it's not like that.
No, it's not. It's not gore porn. It's not torture
Mm-mm,
porn
mm-mm.
or anything like that. I don't know that it necessarily was. I haven't done a ton
Yeah,
of research on this movie. For some of the other
yeah,
movies that we featured, we did some research, or maybe the feature included a
yeah,
documentary. So
yeah.
there was none of that here.
Okay,
But I don't believe it was marketed that way.
okay.
And it's certainly not a blockbuster.
No, no, no.
What you've got is just, I feel, a very understated
Hmm.
horror film that
Yeah,
has some level of comedy, almost to ease off the tension at certain points where
yeah,
it starts
yeah,
to ratchet up so badly. I
yeah,
mean, it really ratchets up so badly, and then they sort of break the tension by bringing in this sort of black comedy sort of shift
yeah.
that doesn't last. Thankfully,
No.
they get
And
back to what people are there to see, which is a good horror flick. It's
yeah.
not a, it, there are some, I guess, what you could consider, supernatural elements. They
Oh
don't
yeah, I
rely
think
on
so.
it. They don't rely on it. Let me, let's talk a little bit about. I mean, the basic premise. You have a soldier who's played by Guy Pearce,
Hmm.
who fighting the Mexicans for the
Yeah.
United States. I
It
think
was
in
the
1847 or something like that.
Yeah,
Mexican
it was
American War.
it was, I believe it was the battle that was fought in retaliation for the Alamo,
Okay.
Mexican American War, the Santa Ana, that whole thing. I think
Okay.
that's what that was. Yeah, that war. Yeah.
So what happens is we have an American soldier played by Guy Pearce, who essentially receives a commendation through a roundabout series of events for cowardice.
Hmm.
This very sort of ironic situation unfolds, and he receives this commendation for cowardice, but is sort of sent away. Here's the promotion, but we don't want you around. He's sent to this very remote outpost in California,
Hmm.
which is, has this skeleton sort of crew.
Yeah.
And as he's beginning to settle in, this other character, played by Robert Carlyle,
Yeah.
appears in the camp and starts to tell this fantastic story, basically leading all the soldiers in the camp outward to attempt to rescue
Yeah.
people that they feel are in danger. Um, I mean, one of the things that I really liked, and it seems to be premised on a Native American mythology that doesn't get touched
Mhm.
upon very often in films.
Yeah. No, it does.
Um, I mean, you might see, a Native American in a movie, or you might see even a
Yeah.
Native American movie, but you don't see a movie that's sort of premised on Native American mythology. So in this particular movie, it's the Wendigo.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if it's accurately portrayed, this, that, or the other, but it's effective for
Yeah. Yeah.
purposes here.
I I think they did some homework, when they wrote this thing. When we were watching that behind the scenes featurettes with the director, like that one deleted scene where the guy was putting on his belt and stuff. She said that was accurate. They did do some homework and some research. So if there's a detail as minute as that, I'm sure the Wendigo stuff, or Wendigo, however you pronounce it, I'm sure there is some, they may have taken liberties with it, obviously, because it's a mythological creature, but I'm sure it was mostly accurate, the myth behind it. Um
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
Yeah. And what
You
did
don't
they
see
say?
many Native American myths in horror, though.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. No.
The only thing I can think of, and well, two instances I can think of, Pet Cemetery,
Oh,
where the cemetery ground supposedly is haunted by the Wendigo.
yeah.
And there's an X file from the first season about the Manitou.
I've
Uh,
heard that.
it's their only werewolf episode.
Oh, okay. It's their kind of their version of a werewolf.
Yeah, it's the Manitou, and it takes possession of you, and
Yeah.
these sorts of things. So, I mean, there's sort of an untapped vein there that not
Hmm.
many people take advantage of. So, um, there's a lot of things in this movie that you just haven't seen before.
Yeah.
In other films, they're coming at you from like an original direction. An original idea doesn't happen very often
No.
in movies. Period.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
movies. Period. And they've done that here, and I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah. I think so. I think the it was also, and I had never heard of the director. I don't know what else she did, what else she's done, but I think she assembled a great cast too.
Yeah,
I mean, everybody, I mean, it's always Robert Carlyle's always a treat to watch.
yeah,
I mean, I've seen him in tons of movies. He's always great in um what's the Bond movie he's in? World Is Not Enough as Renault.
yeah,
He's always great. He was great as, and I know the Beatles isn't your thing, but in it was a movie, it came out a couple of years ago about this guy who, like, he's living in a world without the Beatles or something like that. I think it's called, I forget what it's called, but
Paradise.
anyway,
Is that what it's called?
Robert Carlyle plays John Lennon.
Oh, really?
It's it's like a what if scenario. What if John Lennon had lived to be an 80-some-year-old man?
Okay.
It's really, and he does a great job with it. I mean, you could barely tell it's him because he's under makeup, but Robert Carlyle is very versatile. And
Yeah.
it's funny because watching this, when he's first introduced, um, you're not sure what he's about. He just kind of reeks suspicion the minute you see him. Um,
Or at least bad fortune. Something
yeah,
bad
yeah,
happened with
yeah,
his
yeah,
arrival. You can
yeah.
tell instantly.
Yeah, and then he gets, I felt at a certain point he was getting kind of campy and over the top, but then I realized that was part of the whole performance because
Yeah.
later on in the movie, he definitely wasn't campy and over the top.
Right.
So, that was a ruse basically.
Yeah.
But it was like I said, a small cast, and um what I thought was interesting too was the music.
Yeah.
The music was very, like, not your typical horror stuff. I mean, there was like that one scene with the banjo and stuff like it was kind of like juxtaposing what was happening on screen.
Yeah.
Eh, You know, and I said this before and I'll say it again. I thought more about it, and this is probably the weirdest comment. And whoever's on here watching this thing afterward, they'll probably disagree with me 100%. But I felt, and I said this to you, I felt like for some reason this could have been a Sam Peckinpah movie. I
Hmm.
mean, if you know the weird westerns and the stuff that he made, especially if you're veering more into his, like, more lighthearted stuff like the Ballad of Cable Hogue and stuff like that. This is it's got, like, I was picturing different characters like the doctor. I was like, that's totally a Warren Oates character if this was Peckinpah. But I mean, I don't know if Peckinpah would do the whole
Yeah,
thing.
I was going to say, you
Yeah.
make, I think you could probably make the argument that the director's name is Antonia Bird, that
Antonia Bird, yeah.
she borrowed, maybe some
Yeah.
of that
Oh
feeling,
yeah. Yeah,
some of
yeah,
that feeling. But I
definitely.
mean, this is, it's a really dark movie.
Yeah, it is. It
It's
is.
a dark, dark movie.
And there's
And it's dark, um, with the exception of one small section, like where they
yeah,
go off into the banjos. So
it's yeah. And it's there's no like it's yeah, you said it's dark and it's very bleak. There's no happy moments really.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk, we can talk a little bit about some of the sequence of events. I mean,
Yeah.
eventually you find out that Carlisle is clearly the villain
Yeah.
in the movie. And again, like you, I've enjoyed Carlisle, although in some different movies, I've enjoyed him in Train Spotting, where he pays
Yeah.
booty. The only person who's not using heroin in the whole movie, so he's just railing against all the people using drugs. And I enjoyed him in 28 Weeks Later.
Oh,
He
that's
was
right. Yeah.
yeah, he was one of the co-stars of that. So it's clearly revealed that Robert Carlyle is the villain, and then you start to get into this well, I mean, the cannibalism storyline just sort of explodes,
Yeah.
onto the screen. Also, with a sort of undercurrent of vampirism,
Yeah. Definitely.
because all of these people, there's a recurring theme of injury.
Hmm.
There are a few different themes that are just constantly repeating in this, but I was just thinking of this now as we talked about it, of injury and the restorative powers,
Yeah.
as crazy as that sounds,
Of the yeah.
of consuming the flesh of another person.
Well,
Uh,
and I think
and
yeah.
George, well, hold on, it's George the Indian at one point makes the argument that the white man, eats the body of Jesus Christ
Yes, I was just
every
going to say
Sunday
that.
for
Yeah.
restorative
Yeah.
purposes.
Hmm. Yeah, well, and that's the thing. That whole the blood is the life kind of thing, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, so it was definitely yeah, and there was a lot of that imagery. There was a lot of the blood and the hunger and that kind of stuff.
and the self denial of Robert Carr of Guy Pearce.
Guy Pierce, yeah.
The suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
The suffering to deny himself what he wants the most. Almost.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a religious sort of connotation because he's
Mhm.
constantly being tempted.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
To eat, and
Yeah.
he's constantly fighting.
Yeah, and this is a different kind of it's not cannibalism like in the case of that movie Alive, where they ate the one guy because they were stranded
They
in
were
a
starving. Yeah.
yeah, and had no food. This was done, but again, it was done in a way that it wasn't like just crazy bloody gore, arms and legs they're nibbling on that kind of stuff. It
Very little of that.
yeah, yeah, it wasn't like that at all. And it was yeah, it was handled almost in the vein of the story. It was I guess it was done, I guess you could say, believably. It was and there was with the vampirism and stuff, there was that element of supernatural, with it when yeah, with the restorative powers and stuff.
In
Yeah.
that people who were constantly injured throughout the
Yeah.
movie would
Yeah.
then be at their weakest, and
Yeah.
supposedly these this curative
Yeah. Yeah.
is
Yeah.
being offered to you, although it's so morally repugnant,
Yeah, exactly. And
that people are maybe it's better to die.
yeah,
And
and
because
you almost
you're sort of getting rid of there's this struggle to keep or let go of your humanity.
yeah, and you almost wonder, I wondered a couple times if Robert Carlyle's character was immortal or was supernatural, that I think it was kind of left ambiguous. That's why the ending kind of shocked, surprised me a little bit because I thought it was, like a fountain of youth, live forever kind of thing.
Hmm.
I thought it was that's kind of what it struck me as, and I thought he was immortal, a couple times throughout.
Well, there's definitely where they're putting the resiliency of the cannibalism cure to the test.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so you have this person that he's kind of like the devil.
yeah, yeah,
He's kind of like the devil.
mhm,
He's very extremely hard to get rid of. He's
mhm,
extremely hard to kill. He's
Yeah.
constantly tempting,
Yeah.
people he isn't just consuming utterly. If he's not
Mm,
killing you, then he's there to tempt you to come to his side of
yeah.
the fence,
Yeah. Yeah.
so to speak. And then on the contrast, you have Guy Pearce, who is constantly struggling with guilt, and like I think we talked about his own moral sense,
Hmm.
because the movie starts out where he's being branded essentially a coward,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but I think he's constantly working to make himself better.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think so.
You know,
And no, no. I was going to say, I was just thinking about Jeffrey Jones' character,
yeah, I was just about to bring that up. Go right ahead.
and how he was made, with the whole talking about Robert Carlyle being the devil and stuff. Jeffrey Jones, what ends up with him, he wasn't really given a choice. How he gives Guy Pearce the choice or the temptation or whatever.
Doesn't Jeffrey Jones choose?
Well, no, because it was because I thought he just gave it to him to keep him alive.
I don't remember that now. I want to say that my point that I was going to make was that Jones is sort of the opposite of Pierce. He gives into at the
Yeah,
near
well,
death.
yeah,
He gives in at the near death moment
yeah, yeah,
and decides that he's going to
yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Um,
there's sort of like a contrast in.
yeah, no, and he's a good, and I like Jeffrey Jones,
Same.
and it's a shame what happened to him, but I mean, but he really, it was kind of he was really going strong that year in '99. He had done a few movies.
He's a
He
great
had
actor. He's a great performer.
he had done Sleepy Hollow that year. He had done quite a few, I think. And yeah, he was really good. And and that's why I and yeah, I liked his character. I liked all the characters.
Yeah.
There wasn't one that I didn't dislike, and everybody in it was.
I couldn't live without David Arquette.
Yeah, he was kind of thrown in there. It was almost like as a favor to the director, like, hey, or he like stopped by the studio and they're like,
Yeah, he's not doing me any favors. I mean, what the fuck?
yeah,
I don't want to see
I
David
know,
Arquette
but
like
it's
ever.
just like, hey, yeah. I mean, he really had no. Well, you know what? It was like his part in Bone Tomahawk. He really had,
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he was
he
in Bone
really had,
Tomahawk.
he really had no part in that either.
No,
And
he just keeps showing up for like 10 minutes.
yeah, he's with Sid Haig in the beginning, and then he doesn't he get like arrested, and then he
Do they,
gets
do you find him at the end?
no, I
I
think
think they ate him. Yeah,
yeah,
that's another cannibalism movie. Maybe one time
which
we'll talk about Bone Tomahawk.
yeah, but I actually, and I said this to you, I prefer Ravenous to Bone Tomahawk. I story wise, I like it better.
They're
I
both rescue tales of a sort.
Yeah, but I mean, I think Bone Tomahawk, I like it, but I like this one better. I like the story of this one better, and
Uh, I
some
think I
I
think
love Kurt Russell, but
Bone Tomahawk isn't overtly a horror movie. It
no, it's
sort of
not.
descends into this free fall like in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Where you're like, oh my God, this is, yeah, okay, you
yeah,
didn't know. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, but getting back to David Arquette, he always turns up in these movies, and it's like when the director was saying on the behind the scenes, like they had to film, they could only use him for a couple days because he had all these commitments. It's like it's
Doing what?
yeah, I know.
Getting on my nerves 3 months from now in another movie I don't want to see him in.
Yeah. Well, what was he? What was he in that year? Wasn't one of the Scream movies out in
I
'99?
no, I don't follow David Arquette around.
I don't follow
I
this.
go
No,
avoid him
but
as
it was
much as
just funny
humanly
because it was
possible.
yeah, it was just he was kind of the odd man out of the rest of the people in the movie. I like Neil McDonough's part. Neil
Yeah,
McDonough was great.
yeah,
Dum Dum Dugan from Captain America. He
yeah.
was great as Reich, and he was the only competent.
He was the soldier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he was the soldier, and that was another thing that we had talked about. I mean, basically everybody at this camp is sort of incompetent.
Yeah.
You know, these aren't.
It's-
You know, this isn't a. I mean, you could tell it's an abandoned post that nobody comes through and like gets shut down for 6 months out of the year with a
yeah.
skeleton crew.
Yeah. I mean, they got the doctor who's a drunk.
Right.
They, the one guy, the young, who's the religious guy? What did
Yeah,
he?
he's just writing religious hymns all day.
What was he? His job? He was like the poop shoveler or
Yeah,
something.
something like he's like, yeah, it's essentially, yeah, kind of.
Yeah, they were all non-essential personnel.
Yeah,
Basically.
basically.
Um, yeah, and Jeffrey Jones was the commander. He was just
Yeah, who else? Was there anybody else?
well. Then there was George and Martha, the
Yeah,
neighbor.
George and Martha, and they were worth keeping. They
Yeah,
probably could have sustained the place on their own.
yeah. And then am I missing any characters? No. And then David
No,
Arquette.
yeah, and then David Arquette, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's it. Um, but yeah, it was again, I was very pleasantly surprised because I knew nothing about the movie going into it.
That's another thing, I don't mean to cut you off, but
No,
this movie's 22 years old coming up on.
yeah, it's crazy.
Nobody knows about it.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
I know maybe three people who've seen this movie, and
And
it's a fantastic movie.
yeah, yeah. It's very well done, I have to say. Uh,
Yeah,
again, the writing is tight, the acting is tight, everything. And these guys, again, you could tell like the actors, I think they were, I know a lot of actors like doing this kind of independent stuff as opposed to the normal studio assembly line dog crap
yeah,
because it gives them a chance to expand their art. It gives them a chance to kind of take roles that they normally would never have.
yeah.
And I pointed this out to you. Guy Pearce barely talks in that movie.
Hmm.
He doesn't have a lot to say.
Yeah.
I think it comes, and I always kind of underestimated Guy Pearce because I haven't seen him in a lot of stuff.
I have quite a few Guy Pearce movies.
Yeah, and so like to me, it's just like it's just Guy Pearce. But he was good because what he conveyed just through his acting, instead of he didn't need dialogue to propel his performance.
I would watch Guy Pearce play this pen. I've watched him throughout in The Proposition, which is another independent. I can't even name the number of Guy Pearce movies. He's
Was
in
he
Cormac
in?
McCarthy's The Road at the end. It's good to see him there.
Is he?
He's in Iron Man 3.
Yeah, he's Aldrich Killian. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And is he? He's in Memento, right?
Yeah, he's in that. Wow, the
I
first
have
Christopher
that.
Nolan feature.
Yeah, I have that one.
If it wasn't for Joe Pantoliano, that would be a great movie. I can't stand Joe
He's
Pantoliano.
also in the King's Speech. He plays the guy who abdicates.
Oh, King Edward.
Yeah, who marries Wallace Simpson.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and that's the thing. I think he's one of those actors who's kind of underrated, and it's kind of like, oh, look, when you see Guy Pearce in the movie, it's like, oh, look, there's Guy Pearce.
Well, we saw him in Prometheus.
Yeah, yeah,
He plays Waylon.
yeah, and briefly in the next one.
Yeah, he
Um,
plays Waylon again. We've been watching a lot of Guy Pearce lately.
yeah, yeah. But he's what, Australian?
Something like that.
He might have a lot more movies in Australia than he does like in this country and stuff.
I just don't think he's a blockbuster kind of actor. I mean, you
No,
see
he's
him in
not.
Iron Man, but generally that tends to be about it.
Yeah, and neither is Robert Carlyle. I mean, he's not a household name
Right.
in this country. I mean, I think most American audiences would know him from James Bond, would know him from World Is Not Enough. I don't think many, I mean, I'm talking about mainstream stuff, because I really can't think of any other mainstream movies he was in. I mean, Train Spotting wasn't a mainstream, it's not a
No,
mainstream movie.
no.
So, and a lot,
28 weeks later.
what's that?
28 weeks later.
Yeah. I mean, people, the regular moviegoer might recognize from that, but and that's the thing. He turns up a lot in European movies and he's English. There he's Scottish or something.
Scottish.
Yeah, so
Same as
he
Ewan McGregor. He because Ewan McGregor is the star
yeah,
of Train Spotting.
yeah, yeah. So but yeah, it was a nice cast. Some of those other guys in the cast I haven't seen before. Like the guy who played
John
the
Spencer is the general.
yeah, John Spencer's the general. I've seen him before.
Yeah, of course.
No,
He's
but
in the. I remember him from The Rock.
yeah,
The
that's
guy.
right.
He's the guy that Sean Connery throws off the roof.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's
Yeah.
also one of the in he's one of the corrupt cops in Copland. He's in
Is
that
he?
he's in that cool shootout at the end with Ray Liotta and Sylvester Stallone when they roll up at Harvey Keitel's
Oh,
house.
really? He's part of that. Okay.
Yeah, he's one of the guys in there. That's a cool scene. But the one guy, the doctor, I've never seen him before, that actor. And the young guy, the religious guy. And then it was and the two Native Americans, I had never seen them before.
I've seen the woman before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've
Okay.
seen her in a few features. Yeah,
George, he has a cool name, like Joe Running Bird or something like
something
that.
like that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um, but yeah, they were you know,
Well, you know,
like I said, I was very pleasantly surprised with the movie, and I enjoyed it because I went in not knowing anything about it, and it was decent, I have to
the
say.
idea that someone would, I mean, because there aren't just a lot of cannibalism movies.
No, well, it kind of turns people off. I mean, most people are like, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, there are, like I said, there's parodies. There's that Cannibal the Musical, and then there's one. It's supposed to be really schlocky. It's called like Cannibal Holocaust or
But
something.
there's a really great. I saw it by accident actually. It's a French film called Raw,
Hmm.
which is about cannibalism. Very well done. That's a really
Yeah,
good horror movie. It's a little cringy though.
yeah. Well, I mean,
And you wouldn't think that from the French.
no,
You know,
no.
they will be making a horror movie, but
Well, Shakespeare dabbled in cannibalism with Titus and
Caliban?
Titus Andronicus, where
Oh
he
yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course,
the queen's son's
sons.
daughter, and he has them killed and bakes them in pies and feeds
Makes
them
them in a pot, feeds it to the queen. Yeah,
to their mom. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's a
They get
very
Anthony Hopkins to do it in the movie.
yeah. Well, in the Vincent Price Theater of Blood, that's one of the ways he kills one of his critics because he's this real. Who is it? I think it's John Houseman or no, Robert Morley plays this one critic who's like
Okay.
kind of flamboyant, and he has these two poodles. And so Vincent Price kills the poodles and feeds them to him in a pie or something like that. It's hilarious, but and I think he like chokes to death on the pie or something.
It's a Vincent Price movie, so
Yes, I love Vincent Price. Um, but yeah, this was, again, I liked that it was a Western, because I love Westerns, and I wasn't expecting that. And I liked it. I think the Western time period worked too,
yeah.
it worked for the movie because the whole cannibal thing I thought was a riff on the Donner Party, you know. Um, that's yeah, kind of was like that's what it made it seem like anyway in the beginning,
Hmm.
it was kind of a riff on the Donner Party. But yeah, it was
I just want to say, what we're doing here is trying not to give away too many spoilers.
yeah, I know.
Before, when we've talked about other movies, if it seems like we're not going into a great deal of detail, it's because I think this is a movie that we both recommend.
Yeah,
But we
oh yeah,
want you to be able to see it without us being able to describe the entirety of the movie. If we
yeah,
go through something like we went through Todd Bryant, well, we went through Dracula a few weeks
yeah,
ago. Like
yeah,
everybody knows the ending in Dracula. So
exactly.
there's no real
Yeah.
spoiler here. We're trying to
We
duck
know
that.
what happens to Dracula.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we all have a pretty good idea
Version.
at this point now in life,
In
what
every
happens to
version. Yeah,
Dracula.
yeah, yeah.
But
Um,
we're trying to duck that here in the hopes that you see it.
yeah.
Um, Scale of 1 to 10, what would you give it?
Hmm. I'd probably honestly give it a solid, maybe. Mm,
You can do halves.
yeah, maybe like a 8. maybe
Okay. Okay.
yeah, like maybe
I was gonna say 7.5.
yeah, 7.5 or 8 for
Seven
me.
and a half and an 8 out of 10. That
Yeah,
sounds, yeah,
yeah,
that sounds
yeah.
good. I think that's something we're going to start doing now in every episode. Is
Hmm.
whether or not we refer it. Last week I did a movie called Weir, which I did not.
Oh yeah, you didn't like that one? Yeah.
No, I mean 60 minutes of the werewolf movie are in daylight.
Oh yeah, you were telling me about that. Yeah.
So you're like,
That's French, right? That's a
yeah,
French.
it was. It was a French movie.
Huh. Wow. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's see werewolf movies are you have to be careful because they become so cliched after a while.
Well, again, it comes down to you never get a good script.
Yeah, yeah.
You almost never have good performers.
No. And believe it or not, I think a lot of performers are reluctant to be under all that makeup and stuff too. I think there's an issue of that. Uh,
I think what's really missing, because I think the formula doesn't change. There's a good script.
oh yeah, that's what it has
Someone's
to
just
be.
yet to write it. I think we've gotten close a couple of times with things like American Werewolf, which was as much of a comedy.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was more of a comedy. Yeah, yeah. I remember
um,
not being scared of that movie.
no, but I mean the horror, the real horror werewolf movie has yet to be
Yeah,
created in my mind.
they haven't.
It always takes a back seat to the vampire flick.
Yeah, and with the werewolf, see, the thing is with the werewolf movies, I know you can because of the werewolf itself, you can kind of go like real super gore with that or not. You could have a werewolf tearing everybody to shreds or take some restraint. It's weird. And my question with werewolf movies is, I mean, the moon goes in cycles, so it's not always a full moon. They never show that part where, like, when it's not a full moon and the people aren't just like normal. But I guess there wouldn't be any excitement in that. But
No, nobody wants to watch the werewolf watch on Netflix.
yeah, it's not a night for me to turn into the werewolf. So we,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of not
fine.
relevant to the story necessarily. I mean, I guess you
Yeah,
could
yeah,
write
yeah,
something that way.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Huh.
So
Well, I think that we're kind of coming to a close here with this one.
okay.
So it's definitely something we recommend.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving it 8. I'm giving it 7.5. So, all
Mm-hmm.
right, that's cool.
Yep.
Um, we'll be back for some more. Please
Yep.
come back to the show,
No,
and
definitely. I can't wait.
we'll set some things up. I'm
Okay.
trying to get for 2 in a row, so I think we're lined up again for this weekend. We're not going to say for what though,
Mm-mm.
and then we'll be back at it.
Okay, cool.
All right. Thanks for coming on, bro. Hey, I
Hey,
appreciate it.
thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right,
All
buddy.
right.
Take care
Yeah.
now.
All right.